For almost 500 million years, coral reefs have been doing something absolutely incredible, building these massive, bustling, vibrant underwater cities. But right now, we're witnessing a massive, unprecedented ecological shift. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into the data behind the ongoing record-setting fourth global coral bleaching event. It's an environmental crisis that is literally altering our oceans as we speak. So let's unpack the science of how these ancient underwater hubs actually function and why they're currently facing a collapse unlike anything we've ever seen in recorded history.
Okay, to really get what's going on, we first need to talk about what a coral actually is, because it's not a rock and it's definitely not a plant. It's an animal, a marine invertebrate. The animal itself is called a polyp. It's this tiny creature that pulls calcium right out of the seawater to build a hard limestone skeleton around itself, kind of like its own little house. But it doesn't live alone. Inside the coral's tissue lives a microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. It's this brilliant, delicate partnership. The coral provides a safe home, and the algae uses photosynthesis to whip up organic carbohydrates, which is the essential food the coral needs to survive. Oh, and as a bonus, that algae is exactly what gives the reef its amazing, vibrant colors.
Now, this tiny little partnership, it is literally the foundation of the ocean. Get this, coral reefs cover a minuscule fraction, less than 1% of the entire ocean floor. They're incredibly rare habitats. Yet somehow, they sustain around 25% of all marine species on the planet. From tiny, colorful fish to massive apex predators, a quarter of all ocean biodiversity relies entirely on these hyper-concentrated underwater cities. So when we talk about the health of a coral reef, we're not just talking about the reef, we are literally talking about the health of a quarter of the entire ocean. But what happens when that environment starts to change? Well, the biology of bleaching basically comes down to a three-step process. Step one is that healthy, happy symbiosis we just talked about, the algae feeding the coral. But then step two, thermal stress enters the chat. When the ocean warms up beyond a certain point, the stressed-out coral panics and actually physically expels the algae right out of its tissues, which leads directly to step three. Without that algae, the coral loses its main source of food and its color, leaving behind this stark, ghostly white limestone skeleton. Now, the coral isn't dead at this point, but it's starving, it's incredibly weak, and it's highly susceptible to disease. And the main culprit behind this extreme stress is a marine heat wave. That's when ocean surface temperatures stay abnormally high for 5 or more days. Now, you might be thinking it takes a massive, boiling temperature spike to fry a reef, right? Actually, no. The reality is so much more fragile than that. Researchers have found that the global reef tipping point sits at just about 1.2 degrees Celsius of warming. Just 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above the normal summertime peak is completely enough to trigger severe bleaching. And because of long-term warming trends, these marine heat waves are hitting harder. They're happening way more often, and they're sticking around a lot longer. The result is just a landscape of stark, white skeletons. Imagine being a fish that relies on a complex, colorful, vibrant neighborhood, and suddenly you're swimming over a totally starving ecosystem. It's bleak. Now, if the water temperatures cool down relatively quickly, the corals can actually take the algae back in and recover. There's hope there. But if the heat wave drags on for weeks or months, those corals will simply starve to death. Here's the thing, mass global bleaching is a purely modern phenomenon. Before 1979, there were 0 scientifically recorded global bleaching events. 0. The very first one hit in 1998, and it impacted roughly 21% of the world's reefs. Fast forward to 2010, and that number jumped to 37%. Then, the third event, which dragged on from 2014 to 2017, absolutely devastated 68% of global coral reefs. You can literally see the intervals between these massive heat stress events shrinking. We are giving the reefs less and less time to bounce back from the trauma. Which brings us to right now. In April 2024, the fourth global bleaching event was officially confirmed. And by early 2025, the data revealed a reality that is just staggering. 84%. A record 84% of the Earth's coral reefs have been impacted. Coral reefs across the territories of at least 82 different nations have suffered bleaching-level heat stress in this single, ongoing event. We are looking at the most extensive and intense coral bleaching incident in all of recorded history. This isn't just a warning sign anymore. This is a global ecosystem crossing a critical threshold. When you look at the regional collapses, it's pretty alarming. Down in Florida, a completely unprecedented 2023 heat wave pushed water temperatures up to a bath-like 101 degrees Fahrenheit. That led to near 100% mortality of key reef-building corals in some areas.
basically functionally extinct. Meanwhile, over in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef kicked off another massive bleaching event, with the 2024 footprint being the largest one they've ever recorded. The heat stress in the Atlantic got so extreme that NOAA literally had to invent new alert categories. They added levels 3, 4, and 5 just to capture the extreme risk of near-complete reef mortality. They had to rewrite the scale.
So why does this matter to you and me living up here above the surface? Well, because this isn't just some sad ecological tragedy, it's a massive socioeconomic crisis. The annual global economic value of coral reef ecosystems is estimated at roughly $9.8 trillion. That's trillion with a T. So we aren't just losing a gorgeous place to go scuba diving or snorkeling. We are losing critical natural infrastructure that physically underpins the global economy in ways most of us don't even realize. To put that into perspective, that $9.8 trillion represents some incredibly vital ecosystem services. We're talking about the livelihoods of up to 1 billion people worldwide. 1 billion. We're talking about heavy-duty coastal protection, where these reefs act as natural seawalls, buffering our coastlines and human infrastructure from the devastating impacts of storm surges and wave energy. And maybe most importantly, food security. Hundreds of millions of people rely on reef fisheries as their absolute primary source of protein. If the reef goes, the fishery goes right along with it. And the aftermath of sustained bleaching? It's an irreversible, cascading collapse. You know, a living reef is this complex, three-dimensional world, totally teeming with biodiversity. But when it dies, the coral skeletons just become brittle. They get smashed and broken down by waves and storms until that once complex habitat erodes into flat, algae-covered rubble. And once a reef hits this barren, flattened state, the vital fisheries collapse, the coastal protection simply vanishes, and that vibrant underwater city is reduced to nothing more than an underwater wasteland. But listen, the scientific community is not just giving up. They are fighting back hard with human intervention. There are some really cool programs out there like NOAA's Mission Iconic Reefs that are testing out innovative, resilience-based management. Scientists are actually hunting for and identifying supercorals. These are specific genotypes that somehow naturally survived extreme heat in places like the Gulf of Aqaba. They're taking these resilient corals, growing them in cooler, deep-water nurseries, and literally stress-hardening them in labs with high temperatures. The goal? To make them significantly tougher before planting them back out into the open ocean. It's amazing work for sure. However, restoration definitely has its limits. Dr. Britta Schaffelka from the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network really hit the nail on the head regarding the paradox of these efforts. She said there are many reasons for the demise of coral reefs, primarily because the ocean is warming at an alarming rate. We must drastically reduce our emissions. And honestly, the source material underscores a pretty stark reality within the scientific consensus right now. Yes, we can grow some incredibly resilient supercorals, but local human intervention simply cannot outplant a globally boiling ocean. Which kind of leaves us with a pretty sobering reality. Some of these massive reef structures, like the Great Barrier Reef, they took over 20,000 years to form. 20,000 years! Yet we've seen 84% of the world's coral reefs damaged by unprecedented heat stress in essentially a single generation. These ancient underwater cities are literally falling before our eyes. So, as we stand on the edge of this tipping point, we're really left with just one huge question. What will be left for the next generation?